So just a little thought before we start applying the paint. This class is very simple if you just place the paint and allow things to happen. You'll get a little unstuck when you try to fiddle and maneuver it around too much. So it's really going to be a case of drop and leave. So if you tend to be one of those bolder painters and you use a lot of colour and you're quite bold, try to be a little lighter, especially on the wings, because that lovely, let me bring in my little one of the finished pieces. The joy and movement comes with sort of lack of paint almost, especially on these sort of back wings where we let this one almost completely disappear. So go light and gentle. But obviously if you're a gentle, delicate painter, you'll probably be absolutely fine. But if you're a little bit bolder, then I would go just a tad gentler on your paint application. So let me get rid of some of the bits and pieces. I don't need those on my desk at the moment. And that to one side. Let's move that salt. I don't need that either. It's a bit better. Okay, so wet your brush. And pick up, we're going to use, just for the wings, I'm just going to use Soda Light Genuine and the Burnt Tiger's Eye. Let's just give those a bit of a squidge, get them awake. Okay. And we're actually going to paint these on, but very quickly wet the area down. So this will encourage, hopefully, some sense of looseness. So instead of wetting everything down, we're going to paint it in and then wet. And this will allow movement because we're going to drag it up the wing. So we're going to wet and drag, and it will encourage that paint to follow and give that lovely sort of sense of, hopefully, lightness and looseness. So hence why, but don't, do this quite quickly. Don't fiddle too much because you can end up with a sort of a strong line, which you don't want of paint. So before I prattle away, I'm going to do this quite quickly. So touch that bottom top edge, shall I say. Give it a little bit of a rustle. Nice clean water. We're just going to pull that up the wing. Stay within those lines. To get a nice angle. And then backfill that. And really for the rest of the wings, it's almost, as I say, rinse and repeat. If you get little dry patches or something, I would leave that. I haven't, but I've got that little dry patch. I'm going to leave that. See that little raggedy edge? Again, it just gives a little sense of movement. And give that a rustle. If you can see that strong paint mark, just give that edge a little rustle. And of course, if it's a little light and it's not giving you enough punch, you can always add more paint. But I would suggest just on that edge. And I might go just a little bit with a little bit Soda Light Genuine. Doesn't matter if you've gone a little blue, then or you had Tiger's Eye, if you've gone vice versa. Don't worry too much about the colour. We're just trying to, it's all about just trying to get a lovely sense of light and ease, I suppose. I'm going to leave it at that, and what will be. It will obviously move and change as it begins to dry, and that's that. So try not to fiddle. I think you always have this thing, if it's going to be good, you need to spend time on it. It's not always the case. Now, I've probably done this a little cack-handed and there is a reason. Obviously, we're working this way and I'm right-handed, so there's always that risk. So just be careful you don't. It would have made more sense to work this way. But because I wanted this wing at the back to really be lost, do that lovely lost and found, I'm going to leave it to dry on a slight tilt. So there is method to my slight madness. Okay, exactly the same. So if you felt that was a little bit blue or a little bit brown, add a slightly different, be a little bolder with the colour you didn't feel you had enough of on this one. So exactly the same. So if you found that was, you were a little heavier, add a little less paint, vice versa. If it was a little light, then go a little heavier. Trying to get I can't move my desk and my paper around, so I'm trying to do some funny angles here to get that lovely angles right. Plenty of water, and just allow that colour to run in. And say if you get left with little dry patches, I would just go with that and let them be. But make sure that head, you get that wing going round the shape of the head just right, up against that little edge. Now with this one, again, you can choose to or not to, but I'm going to do it. So I'm just going to wet the paper outside and just allow some of that colour to come out, just the very tip. So it's just wet to here. I don't want to put any colour there just to show you, because obviously it'll be a bit odd. But so just a tiny fraction. Make sure your water's lovely and clean, and just pull it right out. You won't find a lot of movement, but they just give it that lovely soft edge once it dries. So give that little bit a go. Tiny, I seem to be a bit heavy with the blue here. Tiny bit of tiger's eye there, just to break up the blue a bit. Yeah, always take your brush away. Have a little look. See what you think. I'll dry it. Funny little dry patch there. I don't think I want that one there. Kind of want to just give your eye just a scent to that shape. So I'm just going to come in a little bit there. I had a one-to-one that came in the studio a little while ago, and they licked their brush or to get the excess water off. I find I keep doing it now. It's awful. I must dip it on my paper towel. At least you don't have to see me doing that. Okay, I think that's worked nice. Pleased with that. Now, because this back wing is touching the front wing, I'm just gonna, when I add the paint, I'm just going to make sure there's a tiny little white line, just enough to separate it. We'll join it up in a minute, but at the moment I don't want all this colour running into this wing. But make sure it's just a slither, because if you do forget, then it won't matter too much. But we will try and remember to join it up. Come right in. It actually, the wing goes into the body a little bit, so make sure that comes in there. Put a little bit more tiger's eye there. I'm being a bit mean with my burnt tiger's eye. Okay, exactly the same as we did with that. Yeah, probably more with that front one. Keep adding lots of water and just keep drawing it up. Very gently. If you add too much, probably better to add too much water and almost then suck it up a little bit of kitchen roll than it is to, it's called drag a lot. You don't want to be, you want to just allow everything to do its own thing. You don't want to interfere too much with this one. I'm going to put the tiniest bit of burnt tiger's eye just there. Just, yep, that's enough. I don't want too much. It's so easy to do these too heavily, and you lose that lovely sort of sense of magic. So go gentle. If you've done the dragonfly class, it's not dissimilar, trying to do those lovely translucent wings, just trying to keep wings very light. And if you've got a lot of water sitting there, you can always just sort of suck it up a little bit. So you just dry your brush, pop your tip of the brush in there, and it will just suck some of that water up. Mainly it just speeds things along, because if there's a great big puddle on these wings, it takes a long time to dry, but it wouldn't matter because it would give a nice sort of shape and patterning. Okie doke, let's join that little line up before I forget. So just very gently, almost add a little bit more paint if there's not enough. It doesn't matter if they then run into one another at this stage, that's fine. I just didn't want that back wing to run into the front wing at the earlier stage. And again, just make sure that head and back's got a nice shape. Right, let's do the back one on this one. I'm definitely going to do a little more brown. Just going to do a little more tiger's eye. Again, making sure you get that nice shape of the neck. And exactly the same again. Just careful with your hands, putting them into the wings of the other ones. It's a bit trickier not being able to move my paper, but let's see if I can do this. Plenty of water. Just honestly allow it to move. Make sure you got what's really nice is to make sure there's a real tip that almost disappears rather than anything blunt at the end. Just make sure that's lovely and neat. I'm going to leave that, that's fine. And the same again, we will leave a tiny little white line and go a little bit blue on this one. And this one we're going to wash straight off. We're going to wet outside and then allow that to really disappear off. So make sure plenty of paint. Put tiger's eye in there. Clean your brush, and again exactly the same. Get the wing shape in, then we can wet outside and allow it to run. Put a bit of tiger's eye there. So you want to work quite quickly because you really don't want where you've put the V of paint in. You don't want to see that V underneath. Just going to give that a little minute to dry just a tiny bit because that's quite wet. If I wet this out here, I think it's going to, there's too much paint there. I think we're going to have too much paint here, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to allow it just to dry just for probably a minute, if that, just to take some of that excess water off. I could see if we can take a little bit of water out. No, I kind of want it to dry on its own if I'm honest, but I will just join up that little white line again. Making sure it's nice and neat, make sure the back's nice and neat. If you want a little extra colour somewhere, no, that's wrong. Let's have a bit of tiger's eye. Be careful not to add too much water at this stage. Just want paint. Again, take your brush away. Try not to fiddle with any other wings. I would keep those, as light. Don't try to fiddle with them. It would be better, if I'm honest, if something's gone a little wrong and you've gone too heavy-handed, almost better to, I say, start painting again. That's really hard, isn't it? But you want that lovely looseness rather than going back in and doing extra layers, which we have done in past classes when you're adding sort of depth. Here you don't really want that depth, I don't think. You just want that lightness. Okay, I think it might be a little bit too soon still, so judge your own piece. If yours is lovely and dry, or drying, should I say, not lovely, you don't want it dry. You have to be a little bit of a judge of your own piece and drying times, but yeah, I think that's not bad actually. I'm just going to, I've wet that, I've gone right up against that wing. I'm just going to allow that to blend out. So I've wet it, all this is wet here. All this area behind the back of the wing. And by pulling like this, it's just encouraging that paint to come out. Again, try not to go in there to encourage it to. You just want, it's just catching it. The timing is critical really. And that should dry quite nicely. And what I will do, let's pop those down now. We've done the wings. Be a little judge. If it's running quite a lot, you don't want to put it on a tilt. If it is dry, if it isn't moving very much, we can then allow it to dry a little bit on a tilt. So I quite like how that's moving. If I put that on a tilt, I think too much of that colour is going to run down. I don't want that. So yes, just have a little look at your piece. So I'm going to pop a little bit of tiger's eye. It's just gonna, I've lost. Oh, I did it there, didn't I? Just put my finger in there. The next trick is then to move along and squidge the paint onto your nice clean paper. Just going to put a tiny bit of tiger's eye, just there. Again, you have to be a judge of your own piece. I just want to move that. Can I rustle that around a bit? Let's see if I can put a little bit of water in there rather than. I think that's the risk of working this direction. I think I've saved it. Right, that really just needs to be allowed to dry on its own. Again, same rules apply with the hairdryer if you've watched previous classes, and if you haven't, just make sure when you do give it a little hairdry that it's not sitting in puddles, because obviously if you put a hairdryer over there, you'll encourage it to blend around, and even worse, you can sometimes blow the paint off the paper. So it's just, the hairdryer is only really needed when it's almost drying. It just finishes that last drying stage off. So yes, allow it to dry.